Grandpa's here!
Hank's always helping out, Grandpa style. Now he's treating his prostate cancer with help from Xtandi enzalutamide. Xtandi 40 milligram tablets treats men with prostate cancer that has spread to other parts of the body and responds to a medical or surgical treatment to lower testosterone. Xtandi may cause serious side effects: seizure, a brain condition called PRESS, allergic reactions, heart disease that can lead to death, falls and bone fractures, swallowing problems, or choking that can lead to death. Stop Xtandi and get medical help at once if your face, tongue, lip, or throat start swelling. Tell your doctor at once if you faint, have a seizure, quickly worsening headache, decreased alertness, confusion, vision problems, chest pain or discomfort, or shortness of breath. Xtandi can cause harm to an unborn baby or miscarriage. Use birth control during and 3 months after Xtandi. Common side effects include muscle and joint pain, feeling unusually tired, hot flashes, constipation, less appetite, diarrhea, high blood pressure, bleeding, falls, fractures, and headache. Talk to your doctor and visit xtandi.com.
ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track, and ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
Impact confirmed. The Slayer has been activated.
Demonic threat level increasing.
Hold the line!
All the power of hell cowering before one man.
id Software presents Doom: The Dark Ages. Available now on Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 5, and PC.
Rated M for mature.
You're listening to...
They're gonna call it a hard foul! They're gonna call it a hard foul!
All right, we are Hard Foul, Mike, brought to you by the what?
Fan First Sports Network, bitch. The Celtics. Gross.
Yeah, there's 4 teams left, and the Celtics are not one of them. The proverbial piss down our leg game. Man, Mike, when they lose in these elimination games, they go down in just a ball of fire. You look back to Golden State and Miami in Game 7, and then obviously this was the worst against the Knicks the other night in Game 6. The Knicks were really good, especially on defense. They like the best I've ever seen them, I think, in that regard. But the Celtics, just there was no pushback. They were a puddle, an absolute puddle from the opening tip to the end of the game.
Yeah, it was a mess. There isn't one player who played well.
No.
I mean, I don't think I've ever seen Derek White play that bad in a game in my life. Jaylen Brown was the only one holding it together there on offense. He had half their points midway through the second quarter and really forced to do a lot. And now the more I learned about him after the fact, I have some more compassion with the way he was playing with the turnovers. I don't know what we expected from Brown to do when none of his teammates could do anything. So that game was over. That game was over quick. And were they ever down 40? Did they ever get to that point? Or
yeah, didn't they lose by 40? I don't even know what the final score was. Yeah, they were definitely
40.
They were down plus 40. And Brown, I thought he was terrible throughout the game. I thought that was one of the worst 18-point first halves I've ever seen in my life. Certainly we learned more about the knee, but coming off the game he had in Game 5, I think it's probably, now that we know about the knee, you wonder like when he got his pan injection shot, Was it prior to game 5? How I don't know how this stuff works,
Yeah.
but he looked like a completely different player. The turnovers were absurd. His defense really wasn't good. And that was him the majority of the series outside of game 5. He really was just a negative player for the most part in the series. And I think we can probably attribute a lot of that to what we know now, MCL tear in his knee. But yeah, no one else stepped up. Their old guys looked old and Holiday and Horford. Derek White just couldn't get it going. And then, what do you really expect from anyone else in that situation? They're not really playmakers, so you become really limited.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
awful. I mean, and Porzingis was running around out there again. And I mean, Jim, you talk about Brown. He didn't have a great series. This one good game. You go back to the first 4 games. Jason Tatum only played one good game in this series. This was just not a good series by the Boston Celtics. You can't blow 20-point leads at home. Just a really pathetic way to end the season, and it's very disappointing. And I'm very thankful that they won the championship last year because I think the window on this team might be officially closed.
Oh, it definitely is. I mean, the Tatum injury did that. I mean, the Tatum injury just changes the outlook on everything. Um, and you even go back to that game 4 loss. Now looking at it now, I mean, you didn't really have. It was just Tatum,
Uh-huh.
playing at a high level, and it did it. I guess it didn't look that much different than game 6. I mean, it was a little bit different. They were a little bit more competitive. They hit threes early to keep them in the game, but that second half really didn't look that much different than game 4. And
And the Knicks look like the better team.
they looked
That's
like the
what
better
ended up
team
happening.
through 4
Yeah,
through 6, with the exception of game 5, right? They looked through the better team, and
yeah,
those first 2 games, those are the ones you're always going to look back on. The blowing of the 20-point lead. Um, and you were probably right. There was just something wrong with the DNA. There's something wrong with the health. Um, you mentioned on the pod at the start of the playoffs or right before the playoffs that you didn't think the Celtics could overcome both Brown and KP. This was before we knew about KP's sickness, if they were
yeah.
both hurt. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, KP was supposed to be that X factor for them when their offense bogged down, that you could go to
Of
him on
course.
mismatches and go to the pick and roll and, not have those fourth quarters like you used to have a couple of years ago, and that they ended up having in games 1 and 2. And that wasn't available at all.
Yeah.
And Brown wasn't himself, with the exception of really maybe 2.5, 3 games this entire playoffs.
Uh-huh.
And even if they had won games 1 and 2, this thing was probably ending next series anyways. Or if they split game 1 and 2, it was probably ended in game 7 in this series.
Yeah.
Um, Especially, with Tatum out. So I don't know. Like
And especially with the level that the Knicks were playing at. I mean, the Knicks were playing very well in this
yeah,
series in the mid through the third quarter to the end of games. I mean, they were clutch. They were clutch on both ends of the floor. They had different guys who would hit big shots, whether it be OG hitting corner threes or Bridges just killing you with the mid range. And of
McBride in
course, then,
game 6 and Mitchell
yeah, McBride
Robinson.
was great in game 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mitchell Robinson's defense in this series, they just had that DNA and they were ready to bring it, and you weren't. And I also think, Jim, like that Sham story that came out either right before the playoffs or right in the middle of the Orlando series, I wonder if it affected the attitude or the I'm losing the word I'm looking for, but when he came out with that story to say that the ownership was going to make changes, that this was coming, that seemed like a real bad time for them to hear that. And I wonder if it affected the locker room at all with guys saying, well, I got to get ready to pack it up here because I'm not going to be here anymore.
I don't know. I think they're smart enough to know that what the window on this was. And I think that's why they went all in on this season. I think this was a team that really wanted to go back to back. Um, I mean, Wick was on Boston radio saying that pretty much the same thing, after the new ownership deal. So it wasn't like, I don't think it was
Yeah.
news to these guys at
Well,
all,
I guess
you know.
like something I take issue with then is all these guys were signed through this season. So, right, like had they not extended players, they were all going to be here. And I feel like some of these extensions are going to make it harder for them to get value back in trades. I don't know if I want Holiday beyond like a year. I certainly, I don't want Sam Hauser as a guy who's locked up because of his
No,
injuries.
at 10 million a year or whatever it is.
Yeah,
That's nothing for a move shooter when you
but
see
but
Duncan
yeah, but his
Robinson at 18 and other players. Yeah,
his injuries are adding up. His effectiveness, I don't know. I
yeah,
yeah,
I don't. No, look, I kind of all those moves at the time they made sense and they were gearing up, to try to go back to back. I'm reading stuff now that Cornette turned down more money to come back for this season, and it didn't work out. It clearly didn't work out. It was a failure in the playoffs, um, which is too bad because I thought this team really hit its stride in like March and April and was playing at such a high level that. And looked like the team from last year for the first time, right? They really did. And it just it kind of collapsed. And the domino effect, I think, really happened. You had uh without Porzingis and Brown not what he was and missing Tatum even for a game in the Orlando series, it added more minutes and more kind of pressure to perform on guys like Holiday and Horford. And you wonder how that affected them, into the series when you only have a game off in between games. They certainly looked like tied guys in
they
game
weren't very good.
six. They looked like tied guys in game four. You would see certain games where they played better, but they didn't look like themselves. So you wonder how the impact of those things wore on them. Um, yeah, but just completely disappointing. And you're right, significant changes are coming. Everyone knows they're coming. Um, but I've seen a lot of what you've said about like it's going to be tough to deal these guys. I just maybe Holiday, there's something to that, but I don't think it's going to be as difficult as people think it is. These players are still going to be valued, especially for teams that are looking to get over the hump and win a championship or take a next step, or maybe have some restraints in the free agency market. And that's the other thing that like makes trades more plausible now and gives the sellers some more leverage than they used to have, is that the free agency market really doesn't exist anymore. You get some mid-level players, but you don't really have hugely impactful players really hitting the market. And even when you do, there's so few teams that have money to spend that the market is really condensed. So I think there'll be room to move. And I look at teams like all three teams in Texas, Houston, San Antonio, and Dallas. I look at Orlando. To me, those are the teams to watch when we start talking about Celtics players that could be potentially moved. But let me ask you something before we go there, Mike. Do you feel like this was more um, injury related, this playoff run? Do you think it was more pissing down their pants, or do you think it's some combination of both?
I think injuries definitely played a factor, but the way they played in the fourth quarter in this series, Ken, it's more than injuries.
Yeah.
They just couldn't close games. They couldn't hold on to leads. I mean, even in game four, they were up by 14 in the third quarter.
Yep.
They couldn't make stops at critical times. They just couldn't execute. They didn't really run offense. If we're going to be honest, it was attacking matchups and 5 out.
And it was just attacking
if things
matchups
would
with just two
things would like
guys.
yeah, if things would slow down, slow with no pace. And I didn't realize in the regular season that they were the second slowest offense in the NBA. I
They were
think
like
those
that
things,
last year too.
yeah. I think those things need to change. I do. I think they have to change the way they play on offense to be more efficient. They have to have more ways to score. They have to use the post up game. They have to use pick and roll more. They have to go to the basket more. Um, just really ugly. Just really, really ugly on offense and really ugly out of timeouts. They never looked ready out of timeouts. So I definitely think injuries played a factor. That's obvious with the way it impacted Jaylen Brown. And I mean, Kristaps Porzingis, but they weren't the same team as last year. Last year they could go to other stuff. Last year they would run sets, they would run plays, they would attack you in different ways when things weren't working. They would execute. They were one of the best teams at the end of games in the playoffs last year in close situations. And they just weren't that this year.
No, they certainly weren't. I mean, yeah, you look at every, games 1, 3, and 4 of the Pacers series, all the plays they made down the stretch to beat them, and the clutch shots and the key passes and the key defensive plays.
Yep.
There's so many of those that you could think of. It just it felt like, in game 5 when Tatum was out, they would be willing to attack a guy like Brunson with anybody. And I thought it was a really good strategy going at him, and then you could get into your sets, and the ball started popping, and you really forced Brunson to play both ends. I thought games 1 and 2, especially, it was basically Brown and Tatum hunting like Kyle Anthony Towns or Brunson, and the Knicks were just ready for it. And you can almost understand it in some regard for game 1 because it worked so well during the regular season that you can chalk that up. But then to not have that adjustment in game 2 when things started getting tight again in the fourth quarter was really disappointing and surprising.
Yeah,
Um,
the fact that they didn't get a shot off at the end of the game in two straight playoffs
two straight
games.
games. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
really bad. So like I think you know, I think it's really disappointing those first 2 games, the way they lost. Really no excuse for it. Um, I think if they won 1 or 2, I'm not sure they're winning this series if Tatum still gets hurt. If they won both, obviously they would have won this series. Um, I don't think they go beyond this series based on their health and everything. But at the same time, I'm the type of fan, Mike, at this point in my life that obviously I want a championship, but I just want more basketball. I
exactly.
want more good basketball. And so, and I want these things to go as long as they possibly can. And I want them to maximize um, their potential. And they didn't do that. And that's really disappointing. And you can't, you know, even when like that Golden State year where they lost in the finals, you could say they should have won the championship and you can make but I think they really maximized their potential. They were a 500 team midway through. They got to the finals and lost to a Golden State team where Steph Curry was playing out of his mind and a team with a lot of championship DNA. The Miami season, they definitely crapped out. They should have went back to the finals. But this one's the worst. Yeah, like I have a hard time getting really upset about losing in a championship or an Eastern Conference Finals Game 7. Not to get to the conference finals with this group, even banged up. I think it's a huge disappointment. I think it's for the playoffs. I think this regular season I would never call a failure. They did what they were supposed to do. They made it entertaining for me. I really enjoyed it the last few months. I definitely think the playoffs you can call failure. I don't think I would be saying that if they got to the Eastern Conference Finals and they lost, and I know about their injuries against a Pacers team that matches up with them already extraordinarily well. It's different than the Knicks. The Knicks don't match up with this team. Obviously matched up a lot better as the series went along, but they didn't. Even in games 1 and 2, you could feel it, you could see it. You watched it, and they failed. And so I think, um, unfortunately for them, that's how you're going to remember this season.
Yeah, I mean,
Thank God for the championship, like you said. Um, but disappointment and a failure. And I would like, I'm being fair here. I would not have called it a failure if they went beyond this. Obviously the series goes different ways, and maybe you change your mind based on how the series ends up going next. But I think they were, I think that's probably would have been capped out beyond this. But this was a failure in my mind.
yeah, Knicks had mental toughness, and the Celtics did.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, that was the key to victory for New York. They were tough in those moments, and guys stepped up. And New York, they got a real shot to go to the finals. Last year, they took Indiana to 7 games, and I don't know if people forget, but the Knicks had 6 people out in that series that they lost periodically during the series, or they weren't even available from the start. That included Julius Randle. That included Josh Hart. That included Jalen Brunson breaking his wrist in Game 7. That included Mitchell Robinson. So they're not hurt. They're healthy going into the series. I think one huge advantage that Indiana has is the Karl Anthony Towns factor in this series. I think could really be exposed to the extreme with the way Indiana plays on offense.
They play much different than the Celtics. Yeah.
They run an offense.
Yeah,
They're
they
not
average
like
like
Boston.
200 something passes a game compared to like 120 from the Celtics. Yeah, it's extraordinary what they do.
Yeah, so that's going to be a great series. I think that could go 7. Obviously OKC's in the driver's seat now. I don't think there's a real contender for them left, and they look like a championship team. So.
I think the Pacers could. I think the Pacers could give them a real fight. I know OKC matches up well against them. I really like this Pacers team. I have all year. I think you're right. The Knicks definitely have a shot, and I think this is going to be a long series between these two teams. But I just really like this Pacers team, and I think they've been under the radar for whatever reason. Maybe because they don't have a top 20 player or whatever. But I think they got a shot. I'm picking OKC to win it, but I think Indiana has a shot to surprise the world.
Sounds good. I agree. I give Indiana like a 20% shot in that series. I give the Knicks like a 2%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't give Minnesota much of a chance, but I guess you never know when you possibly could have. SGA is definitely the front runner for the best player in that series, but there's always a possibility that Anthony Edwards and Randall, if they continue to play at this level, I mean, Randall's been great. Maybe they make it a series. But they just don't seem to match up. So we'll see.
Tell me what Minnesota team we're getting. Like, are we getting the team that played the Lakers that looked like, a team that was on the rise, or are we getting this team that just played the Warriors that was turning the ball over 20 times a game?
Yeah.
Like they've been Jekyll and Hyde all year. If I guess we got to see what Minnesota team we're getting. If it's the team that just played the Warriors, this is going to be a really short series.
And I'll tell you what, that trade worked out for both teams, the Knicks and the Timberwolves.
I am not convinced on the Timberwolves yet, but on the Knicks, yeah.
I mean, they're in the Eastern Conference Finals. That's
the Western Conference Finals. Yeah, I think that Warriors series was, how would have that went now if Curry never went down? Hey, it looks like it works out. I think the proof will be
but Jim,
in this
you could
series.
say
Are they going
that
to put up a fight or not in this series?
You could say that about the Celtics last year too. I don't like when people do that.
But the Celtics ended up getting all the way through and winning it. So they answered all those questions. To me, you have to answer it in this series. Like if they go toe to toe with OKC and lose in 6, then yeah, that trade worked out. If they play like they did against Golden State, the Celtics never played in a series like the Wolves just played against Golden State. Like I don't think they played well.
Yeah, I didn't
Uh,
watch the games.
yeah, I watched most of them, and the turnovers were so bad. Um, Maybe they were just playing down to their level. There is that.
Mhm.
But I now need to see it from my like I need to see it in this series of them going toe to toe with these guys. And if they do, then yeah, the trade worked.
Lights, camera, innovation. Walt Disney Studios chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business to transform the movie-making process. Together, we kept a remote production hub in Hawaii in sync with a team in California to bring Lilo and Stitch to theaters this summer. This is picture-perfect collaboration. This is Walt Disney Studios with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel? Or that white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
5 immersive worlds, 1 amazing theme park. Get ready to explore the all-new Universal Epic Universe, featuring the wizarding world of Harry Potter, Ministry of Magic, Super Nintendo World, How to Train Your Dragon, Isle of Berk, and Dark Universe. Epic Universe opens May 22nd at Universal Orlando Resort. Our universe will never be the same. Tickets and packages on sale now at universalorlando.com.
This episode is brought to you by Factor. Optimize your nutrition this year with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Eat smarter at factormeals.com/listen50 and use code listen50 for 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Factormeals.com/listen50, code listen50. T's and C's apply.
Oh, Jim, we are at the end of the basketball season for Boston. Usually what are we in our 4th season of the pod here? So
No, this is season 5, so we'll be going into season 6 next year, believe it or not.
yeah. So as we what we usually do is we have a couple over the summer, and we're not consistent.
This is going to be different, I think.
We may have some different things we'll talk about this summer, as Jim may have a project. But this off season is going to be really interesting. I think it could be very disappointing for a lot of us, facing the reality of what's about to happen. And I'll just say I don't think anything at this point would surprise me. Personally, I would hate to see Jaylen Brown traded. But I also understand it's a realistic possibility that could happen. I do find it interesting, all the sports talk radio just diving into the Celtics interviewing Cooper Flag. I don't see any real possibility of that ever happening, but I think it just tells me that they're looking at players at the front end of the draft to see if they can move a player like Brown to maximize as much as they can get back as possible. So it just tells me that this could happen.
Yeah, so it wasn't just Cooper Flag either. I know that he's the one that got the headlines, but it was Trey Johnson, who's expected to go between 5 and 10.
Yeah.
So in those interviews, you only get 12 of them at the combine, and you have to request them and prioritize them. So the fact that they're requesting these guys and prioritizing should raise your eyebrows a little bit. Like, maybe it just makes sense to do Cooper Flag to get to know him a little bit. If he ever becomes a free agent one day, he already knows your front office. I mean, a lot of NFL teams do that, with guys they're never going to draft. So maybe there's some logic there, but like the Trey Johnson one, that's like, oh, okay, this is really interesting. Why are they doing this? Mike, if you take an emotion away from it, your emotion away from this completely, what route are you going? I guess the first thing you have to know is, when Tatum's coming back. But what route are you going?
And I think they already know, by the way. I think that Brad Stevens already has a plan. But
I'm sure he has a few plans, yeah.
Yeah. the route I'm going is I'm building around Tatum and Brown.
Mm.
That's the route I'm going. I think that's the best route still. I think that Jaylen Brown is still going to be really, really good at the end of his contract, and he'll be
So
deserving
would you
of.
be looking to move Derek White?
I'd be looking to move. I definitely. I mean, if ownership is telling me I have to shred salary, Derek White, Holiday, and Porzingis are going before Brown is.
Well, Bridges got 5 first-round picks. What is Derek White worth?
Um, I,
Because I would tell you his value is higher than when Bridges got traded.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know who that desperate team is and who has all that draft capital. Like, I would have said OKC if they lost game 7. But now it doesn't look like they need Derek White. So I maybe, yeah, personally, if I was a GM, I'm not giving up more than 3 first-round picks for Derek White.
So I'm looking at this thing, and um, I think the way you want to go is definitely a reasonable route. Especially if you can see what you can get back. Can you send Derek White to a team like Houston and get in the top 10 this year and see what you get back for players and picks?
Mm-hmm.
But I would not take Brown off the table. And the teams I think you have to look out for are those 3 Texas teams in Orlando. But particularly, I'd be watching Texas and Orlando. Um, the draft is, I believe, June 25th. NBA free agency begins June 30th. You can start talking to your own players that are free agents right after the finals.
Can I name a
But
dark horse team?
yeah, but just give me 1 second on these 2 teams.
Yeah, sorry.
So those 2 teams have team options on players.
Yep.
44 million for Fred VanVleet.
Uh-huh.
Mo Wagner has 11. Gary Harris is 7.5. And those you can trade those team options can be pushed back to right before free agency. So you could essentially trade some players here and then not pick up the team option on those guys and free up a ton of salary. So if, for example, if you did trade Jaylen Brown to the Rockets, you could have Van Fleet being part of that deal, a couple of young players, some picks, and then you could cut Van Fleet, and then that kind of solves, or if it's Derek White, or if you trade Porzingis to Orlando, and you bring back a couple second round picks for Wagner and Gary Harris and one other player, that would save you $18 million on your cap.
Yeah.
So those are the type of deals I would be really looking out for ahead of the draft here.
You obviously done your homework. So I just have 2 points. If I'm a GM, I do not want. I know you disagree with me, and you think, and I bet you there will be GMs that want Kristaps Porzingis. I don't want him. The last 2 playoffs, he hardly played. He doesn't play much in the regular season. I'm not giving up much at all to get them. You mentioned second round picks. I would even protect those picks to say Boston, like you dumping the salary. As
I think
far
there'll
as
be a couple teams in the market for him. So I think there'll be some competition.
yeah, as far as a dark horse team, I don't know if it's possible, but Detroit, I think Detroit needs to make that next move. You got 2 guys in Thompson and Cade Cunningham to build around.
And Ivy too.
Well, yeah, coming off an injury, a guy like Jaylen Brown there makes a lot of sense. I know Harris has like a $35 million team option.
Well, I mean, if you trade Jaylen Brown, you're going to have to give a guy like Thompson back. I mean, if Bridges is getting 5 picks, we talked about Dame Lillard. Brown is value. Like, what you got to get back for Brown is got to be a boatload.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. It's just and if I'm Boston, that's what I want. If I'm other GMs and somebody says to me the Mikal Bridges trade, I'm going to laugh at them and say, "Well, that was the New York Knicks. That was James Dolan. Like, why do you expect me to do the same thing just because he made that stupid trade? Like, I don't think Jaylen Brown is worth 5 first round picks. Is what I would tell somebody. Like, you could get 4 or 3. I would come back and say Luka just got one.
Yeah,
So,
but here's what I'll say. Like, if you're the Rockets, you're this close to being a really good team. You're not going to get that through the draft.
no, you get Jaylen Brown, you can win it all.
There's no free agency. So what is Brown worth to you? He's worth a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be other teams in that spot that will look at Jaylen Brown and say, this could be the guy that gets us to where we need to go. And that's worth a lot.
But don't you also think that teams are going to want Giannis first to figure out that first?
Oh, absolutely.
To get the Brown?
Yeah, I think that's the number one domino to fall, and that's what hurts the Celtics in a lot of regards here, because you want to move this stuff before the draft.
Of course,
you're kind of hoping that the Giannis stuff like really resolves itself quickly.
And that is Durant too.
Yeah, but Brown's a much bigger domino than Durant. If Brown's on the market, then Durant's going to have to wait for Brown.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Yeah, if you're Houston, that's a no-brainer who you want out of those two guys at this point in their career.
Yeah.
And so the best thing that could happen to the Celtics, honestly, is Giannis come out and say he doesn't want to be traded in the next week or so. And that just ends that.
That's not happening.
No, I don't think so. So that'd be the best thing. Otherwise, you're looking to move your lesser assets quickly, and Porzingis and Holiday, and trying to figure that out with maybe 3-team deals or whatever. But again, that becomes a little bit difficult, because those are the type of guys that are like finishing touches. Still players that teams are going to want, but it's after they built their roster already. They don't want to put a big salary in before they make their other moves, right? So, but
yeah, I mean, your other option is like
the Lakers could be interested in KP with their need at center, so who knows?
You're a team like Charlotte, maybe you call Boston and say, hey, attach a second-round pick to KP and we'll take his contract off your hands right now, because we're not going anywhere. If you're a play, even like Washington is still in that boat. Unfortunately, that could happen for veterans.
Yeah, but I don't think he's that damaged unless it's like we find out he can't play again. This illness was something. I mean, all you have to go back is a month and see that he scored 34 points in Madison Square Garden on 8 3-pointers, and he was playing like that all the time. And then this illness hit. And so if you're a team that needs scoring out of the 5, yeah, maybe I might not have him during the playoffs, but he immediately makes us better, right? And he raises our ceiling, especially if you're a team that there isn't a lot of other avenues to get better. And I think this whole new CBA is so fucking stupid. But in some ways right now, in terms of trading players, it becomes advantageous for you, this new CBA.
All right. Well, we'll have I don't know when we'll do another pod, but I got to get off, Jim. So it's the end of the Celtics season. Disappointment, and we're going to have a disappointing off season. So with that, everybody enjoy their summer.
All right. Take care, everybody.